Given reductions in federal spending for some states, though, are you concerned at all that rural hospitals may wind up closing? We've heard from workers at many of them who believe that they may not be able to stay open. Can you guarantee that this bill won't shut down hospitals in rural communities?
Yeah, I don't believe it will at all.
Now, before we get to the horrendous juxtaposition that is hospitals closing while Alligator Alcatraz opens, if you're looking for who is truly to blame for the big, beautiful bill passing, I want to show you who. People like this, Ron Johnson, who stood on a soapbox with a Velcro spine and a big chest, claiming how bad this bill was for Americans.
I couldn't care less if he's upset. I'm concerned about my children, my grandchildren, and the fact that we are stealing from them. We are stealing from our children and grandchildren. $37 trillion in debt, and we're going to add to it as Republicans? That is unacceptable. And that's why there's no way I'm going to vote for this bill in its current form.
Only to just vote for it anyway, even though the Senate version of the bill was worse than the House's. According to the nonpartisan CBO, it would add $3.3 trillion to the debt over the next decade, $1 trillion more than the House version he was ever so vigorously opposing. Frauds, the lot of them.
What the Senate did is unconscionable. What they did to our bill was unconscionable. I'll vote against it here, and I'll vote against it on the floor.
You're going to hear a lot about the tax cuts, but the deficit, nobody's talking about the deficit. Nobody. I got it. The tax cuts are important. We are going to get the tax cuts done in some fashion. But we cannot saddle our children and our grandchildren with an exploding national debt.
Do I like this bill? No, because I tried to take care of Alaska's interests. But I know that in many parts of the country, there are Americans that are not going to be advantaged by this bill.
In a matter of hours after Republicans danced at the thought of stripping healthcare from millions of Americans, the uncertainty over federal Medicaid funding appears to have claimed its first victim, a community hospital in Nebraska. The hospital in McCook announced that it will close Curtis Medical Center, winding down its services over the next several months.
Given reductions in federal spending for some states, though, are you concerned at all that rural hospitals may wind up closing? We've heard from workers at many of them who believe that they may not be able to stay open. Can you guarantee that this bill won't shut down hospitals in rural communities?
Yeah, I don't believe it will at all. In fact, one of the things that we do know is like states like California, they take about $160 billion a year in reimbursements through Medicaid. That number alone is larger than the entire state budget of Florida. There are several states that continue to overutilize and take advantage of Medicaid and Medicare in these programs that are really meant, again, for all Americans, not just for those in California or New York that are taking advantage of programs or expanding the programs. But, coming from a rural area, this is a really important issue for me because I see how the cost of healthcare has gone up. President Trump, again, I believe is the right person to fix this. He's already addressed it on prescriptions where he's capped prices. I think we're going to see more of those sorts of conversations where if the healthcare industry doesn't fix these problems and getting the cost of healthcare down, that the government and specifically President Trump's going to step in and fix it. And I think we need to. It's no longer a free market industry. It's very much a manipulated and controlled by government pricing and reimbursement rates.
I do just want to point out, for the sake of precision, Congressman, that California is the 5th largest economy, I believe, in the world. And so they contribute enormously to the revenue that the federal government creates by the form of taxes.
Now, this comes as countless rural hospitals across the United States have warned that they were already operating on a razor's edge. And with the new cuts to Medicaid in the new Republicans' bill, it's set to tip many over the edge. The Republican mega bill that the House passed in a 218 to 214 vote is set to extend Trump's tax cuts and allocate hundreds of billions for immigration enforcement. That's right, ICE will receive more money than many militaries across the world. And who's going to foot that bill, to pay for the whole authoritarianism of it all? Well, the bill will slash programs that make up the federal safety net by the largest amount in decades, mostly through major cuts to Medicaid, despite the fact that Trump and many Republicans vowed that they would never touch it.
And we're going to also cut costs. We're cutting $1.7 trillion in this bill.
and you're not going to feel any of it. And your Medicaid is left alone. It's left the same. Your Medicare and your Social Security are strengthened. We're not cutting. The Democrats are going to destroy all three of them because it's not sustainable. They'll end up cutting your Medicare, Medicaid in half.
I will not support cuts to eligible beneficiaries in any way. I've been very clear. I will not support cuts to eligible beneficiaries on Medicaid, whether it's within the IDD community, our seniors, our children, single mothers. The fact is that they need these benefits. They are entitled to them, and we want to make sure that they are protected.
Congressman Austin Scott was with me yesterday. He mentioned about changes to Medicaid and how that could be a part of budget negotiations, basically pulling away federal funding from Medicaid programs, meaning that a state like New York would have to pay more for Medicaid and that the federal government would pay less. Do you have a position on that before you go?
Hell no. New York is a donor state. We pay more into the federal government than we get back. I've been very clear. I am not looking to cut benefits to anyone who is entitled to them, relies on them. You know, we have millions of Americans who have paid into these critical systems. For members like me, I've been very clear. We're going to protect Medicaid. For those who rely on these critical services, all eligible recipients.
Hey, it's Pete. We're hearing that the House has passed the mega bill after it got through the Republican Senate. Now it's on its way to President Trump's desk, and he's going to sign it. When he does, he will create some of the biggest tax breaks for billionaires in history, transferring even more wealth to the wealthiest Americans. And the way they're paying for it is to cut healthcare for working class Americans, to cut food that would go to veterans and children in this country, to shut down rural hospitals and make an entire generation worse off. And they're managing to increase the national debt and deficit while they do it. This is the decisive once and for all answer to what this president and his party are about. You know, it was fashionable for Washington commentators for a while to say that this was a new, different, populist, working-class Republican Party. Now, it has been demonstrated decisively that that was all bullshit, that they're still all about making the wealthy even wealthier at the expense of working Americans. If there's any good news in all this, it's that this is still a democracy. Even now, even with all of the damage that Donald Trump has done to our republic, there is no king in this country, which means we, the people, will have the last word. And it is up to us, the American people, to respond politically and say that it is unacceptable to harm the majority of Americans to make the very wealthiest a little better off.
Well, an estimate from the Congressional Budget Office expects about 12 million people will lose their Medicaid coverage under the legislation. Among its major changes, the bill would cut $1 trillion in Medicaid funding over the next decade and will add new eligibility restrictions for able-bodied adults up to 65 to work 80 hours a month to qualify. And as to be expected, the response from Democrats was staunch and unapologetic, as it should be.
I think this is one of the saddest days in modern American history. This is the largest withdrawal and ending of healthcare in American history. 17 million people in our country, 17 million Americans in our country are going to lose their Medicaid. They're going to lose their ACA insurance. Small business owners are going to have their healthcare costs skyrocket, and people are going to have their SNAP and WIC cut back. People are going to go hungry. People are going to get sick on a scale unlike anything we've ever seen. And all of it is just to finance tax cuts for billionaires and the wealthiest corporations who don't even need it. I don't think we have ever seen or are prepared for how catastrophic this is set to be for a lot of people.
We see it as an act of mass cruelty and collective punishment for no reason. All of it is to fund the huge tax breaks to the wealthiest people in the country while they add $3.5 trillion or $4 trillion to the debt. And Democrats said repeatedly throughout the debate over the course of today, but also this last week and the last several weeks, we never want to hear the words debt or deficit out of your mouth as again. We're not going to entertain any more lectures from you because they are the biggest budget busting deficit doves adding to the national debt that anybody's ever seen.
But beyond shrinking the number of Americans covered under Medicaid, the bill also included a set of reductions on the taxes that states charge healthcare providers to pay for their share of Medicaid. Taxes that help keep the lights on in many of these rural hospitals. Meaning limits to state reimbursements are anticipated to put more hospitals at risk of closing, particularly in rural areas where a larger share of the population rely on Medicaid. And this comes despite poll after poll showing that a majority of Americans oppose this bill and vehemently support Medicaid. Upwards of 79% believe that the government should provide some form of health care to every American citizen. So nothing like supporting the will of the people, am I right?
The truth is more important than ever. Check out our new Truth Over Lies collection at store.MeidasTouch.com. All 100% USA union made.